and very, very interesting, really. I mean, very practical. So I think I appreciate at least all the things that you've been saying also.
Mm-hmm. And what is his name?
Anand Kumar, Mr. Anand Kumar.
Anand Kumar.
He lives somewhere in Haryana. I mean,
where does he live?
In Haryana, state of Haryana.
Haryana.
Yeah.
Chandigarh.
Right. Little south of that, right?
Okay.
Good afternoon, Padurji.
Bhivaji, you can now start. Bhivaji, you mute your screen. Bhivaji, kindly unmute.
Yes, I've unmuted. Thank you for that. Okay. Namaste, dear brothers and sisters. On behalf of the Indian section, I welcome all of you to this second day of our special program on the auspicious occasion of Guru Purnima. We are blessed by the presence of our venerable brother, OLANDE ANANDA THERO, and we are thankful for his spiritual guidance, for expounding to us mindfulness, the heart of Buddhist meditation. This is a text written by Nyanaponika Thera, and it explains in Buddha's own words the way of mindfulness. I now invite Brother Pradeep Gohilji, President of the Indian section, to begin the session with the universal invocation.
Thank you, Vivaji. And since we are not all meeting in person, I will just recite the prayer slowly. And you can all take your thoughts to the higher level. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with thee know he is also one with every other. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Gohilji. Let us all bring our thoughts together in a calm mind, and I now request Venerable OLANDE ANANDA THERA to please lead us through this most wonderful session on mindfulness.
Well, good afternoon, everyone who is watching. Maybe some people good evening or good morning, but I think the vast majority are more or less from the Indian subcontinent. And let me see, today we will put the emphasis on the teachings which are given in this book by Venerable Nyanaponika. Sometimes Jnana is spelled as GN with a Nya, but here it is spelled with NY. Maybe for the Western readers, Nyanaponika. In his temple or monastery, all the monks got the word Jnana before their other name. Jnana Tiloka was his teacher, then Jnana Loka, Jnana Ponika. And this Jnana Ponika, he actually, as I mentioned yesterday briefly, came to Sri Lanka from Germany, fleeing Hitler's, you see, that regime of before the Second World War in 1933. and he actually fled with his auntie. They were both Jewish, and they didn't want anything to do with the war. And they came all the way to Ceylon those days, before it was called Sri Lanka. And he stayed on and on, became a monk in Sri Lanka, in the island hermitage, which is a famous place nowadays. And that's where a lot of foreigners also got ordained. And he started writing books. And this is one of the most famous books that he has written, namely it is written in English and in German, and it has been translated to several other languages. But in English, it's called The Heart of Buddhist Meditation. So I just read a little bit from the introduction to this book, namely the reason why it is called The Heart of Buddhist Meditation. This book is issued in the deep conviction that the systematic cultivation of right mindfulness, as taught by the Buddha in his discourse on Satipatthana, that is the establishment of mindfulness on the body, feelings, mind, and mind objects, still provides the most simple and direct, the most thorough and effective method for training and developing the mind for its daily tasks and problems, as well as for the highest aim, the mind's own unshakable deliverance from greed, hatred, and delusion, lobha, dvesha, and moha. So the teachings of the Buddha offer a great variety of methods of mental training and subjects of meditation suited to the various individual needs, temperaments, and capacities, yet all these methods ultimately converge in the way of mindfulness, called by the Master himself, the Buddha himself, the only way, or the sole way, ekayano maggo. The way of mindfulness may therefore rightly be called the heart of Buddhist meditation, or even the heart of the entire doctrine, Dhamma Hadaya, or Dharma Urdhya. This great heart is in fact the center of all the bloodstreams pulsating through the entire body of the doctrine, the Dhammacaya, the body of the Dharma. In Buddhism, we use in the southern tradition, that is in the Theravada Buddhist tradition, we use a language called Pali. And Pali is related to Sanskrit, but it doesn't have so many R's in it. And the grammar is a little bit more simple. So what is Dharma in Sanskrit is Dhamma in Pali. Karma in Sanskrit is Kamma in Pali. And the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, that is the sutta which we are talking about yesterday, the setting in motion of the wheel of the Dharma, is then Dharma Pravartana Sutra in Sanskrit. Not that I am a Sanskrit scholar, but I do know a little bit about some of the differences in pronunciation. So, but actually there are areas in India, especially around Varanasi and the border between Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, where the language of Pali, where it is called by a different name, is still spoken, even nowadays. And I'm trying to think of the name, what is called there, but anyway, it is, it's on the tip of my tongue. Do you see the tip of my tongue? But it doesn't come up. So actually, this language is still in a way a living language, although it is sometimes called a dead language. It's not being used anymore, but it can be used as a living language. And the whole literature of Theravada Buddhism is in the Pali language. Now, for your understanding, Theravada Buddhism means the way of the elders. Thera is elders, and Vada means like a way. So the countries like Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia, and large parts of India and Nepal, and Bangladesh also, where the Buddhists live in Chittagong, that area, they are using the language called Pali in their Buddhist scriptures. Whereas the what is called the Northern Buddhists or the Mahayana Buddhists, such as in China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, but also in Mongolia and in Tibet and Bhutan, they have all translated the Sanskrit texts of the Tripitaka, what is called the Buddha's teachings, into their own language. So they may not be able to understand each other if they are speaking their own or if they're reading their own scriptures. But the Theravada countries would, at least in the spoken language of Pali, understand each other. But Pali doesn't have any script of its own. You can write it in Burmese, you can write it in Thai, you can write it in Devanagari, or you can write it in Roman script, and then only it's a matter of pronouncing it correctly. So this Satipatthana Bhavana, or the development of mindfulness, is actually the heart of Buddhist meditation. So what does it really mean? Now, there is a certain scope, you can say, of the Satipatthana method. The ancient way of mindfulness is as practicable today as it was 2,500 years ago. It is as applicable in the lands of the West as in the East, in the midst of life's turmoil, as well as in the peace of the monk's cell. Right mindfulness is, in fact, the indispensable basis of right living and right thinking, everywhere, at any time, for everyone. It has a vital message for all, not only for the confirmed follower of the Buddha and his doctrine. So, but for all who endeavor to master the mind that is so hard to control, and who earnestly wish to develop its latent faculties of greater strength and greater happiness. In the first words of the discourse, stating its high purpose, it is said that this method makes for the overcoming of sorrow and misery, for the destruction of pain and grief. It is not that just what everybody wishes for. Suffering is the common human experience, and therefore a method for radically conquering it is of common human concern. So though the final victory over suffering may, in the individual case, still be far off, the road to it has been clearly indicated. And more than that, from the very first stages of that road, the method of right mindfulness will show immediate and visible results of its efficacy by defeating suffering in many a single battle. That means not just one battle, but many single battles. And then such practical results in terms of happiness must be of vital importance to everyone, in addition to the efficient help given to mental development. So actually, this practice of mindfulness can be divided into what is called a formal practice and an informal practice. Formal practice would be if you sit down and practice certain methods, you could call it, of mindfulness. For instance, to be mindful of your breathing is called anapanasati. Now, those who are familiar with S.N. Goenka, who was teaching meditation all over India and the world, that is Goenka's Vipassana meditation. He used to give 10-day retreats. In the beginning, he would have 3 days of anapanasati. Just try to bring your mind to the concentration on the breath, the very subtle object of being aware of the touch of the breath inside your nostrils. Now, that is not a very simple thing. It sounds a little bit like, oh yes, I can do that. But if you really try, you might find that it is too subtle and too difficult to feel. Or on the other hand, you might find that your mind is actually jumping from one thing to another, from the past to the future, from this object to that object, or getting distracted by sounds or thoughts, very often thoughts, or feelings or sensations, and that take you away from that subtle object called the touch of the breath. Now, the thing is that in those, let's say, first 3 days of a 10-day course with S.N. Goenka ji, they still try to focus vigorously, sitting 10 hours a day for meditation on that very subtle object of the breath. Some people may be sitting there and not getting anything done in those 3 days. Others might find it on the first day, some on the second day, and some on the third day. And they find that, oh, is that what concentration on the breath means? It's like a revelation for those who happen to come on that subject or object of the breath and feel it very strongly, as if there's nothing in the world besides it, that kind of concentration. But most people may not be able to find it. But fortunately, the breath is not the only thing in the world. And in the development of mindfulness, of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the Buddha said, well, be aware of your body. What does that mean? Well, be aware of the body, whether it is sitting or standing or walking or lying down. Those are the 4 major postures. Nowadays, we could also add other postures maybe, or activities such as skateboarding and bungee jumping or something like that. So to be aware of such things, or whatever you do in general, actually means to be aware of your body and bodily movements, basically, that you are doing. And also it can mean that you become aware of your body in the sense of whether you feel light or heavy, or you feel hot or cold, or in between, and or that you feel different kinds of sensations on your skin, maybe itching or whatever it may be. That is also a kind of awareness of the body. It's called Vedananusati. First, we have the bodily awareness, that is Kayanupassana or Kayanusati. Sati meaning mindfulness, Kaya means body, the awareness of the body, and then the awareness of the different sensations. So, Vedana Nusati. Then you may become aware more and more subtle kind of objects, namely the mind, Chittanusati or Chittanupassana as it is called, the insight into the mind. That could mean that you become aware of the fact that you are thinking. Or it could mean the fact that you're not thinking. Or it could mean that you have different kind of states of mind, maybe expanded mind or contracted mind, happiness in your mind or unhappiness in your mind. Such things, if you are aware of that, you're practicing mindfulness of or awareness of the mind. Chittanupassana, Chittanupassana. Now, that is, you see, the third kind of object of the four mindfulnesses. And the fourth one would be Dhammanusati or Dhammanupassana, to be aware of the Dhamma. Now, that doesn't mean that you are aware of all the texts in the books of Buddhism or Hinduism or, Dharma, Dhamma, and thinking about all these things, but rather you are aware of, let's say, different kind of qualities or states of mind, for instance, or different kinds of what we call characteristics. One of the set of three characteristics that is mostly mentioned that you become aware of is the characteristic of change. When you really look at yourself, maybe not so much the body, but if you look at your mind and the thoughts and the sense impressions and all that, then you become aware of the changeability of all those objects. You see that they are never exactly remaining the same. And you also will probably become aware of the fact that what is really changing cannot give real happiness. So you become aware of what is called the unsatisfactoriness of these different objects, both body and feelings and mind, everything that has to do with your body-mind complex. Not only with that, but also external objects. They're all subject to change, and they're also not really satisfactory. If you try to find happiness in external objects, you might find some, short-lived pleasure or happiness, so-called, but then it sometimes changes to unhappiness, or the happiness vanishes, and you lose that kind of satisfaction, and therefore it is called all conditioned things are a source of dissatisfaction. They are not satisfactory. They are what is called dukkha. So they are what you call changing, impermanent. That is called all conditioned things are impermanent. Sabbe Dhamma anicca. In Pali they say anicca, in Sanskrit anitya. You have nitya and anitya. Anitya is impermanent. And then there is the what is called the characteristic of what is called anatta in Pali language, or anatma in Sanskrit. Now that is a little bit of a complicated and difficult thing to understand, especially if we are trained mostly in let me mention it, in Hinduism, where Atman is one of the greatest things that we have. Whereas the Buddha said, well, Atman, yes, but it's not really permanent. Like you have a self, well, that is also a bit, we have to see it in different levels. What you call I or you or one is responsible for one's own actions. That is what we can say. One is responsible for one's own karma. So I'm the creator of my own karma. In that sense, the Buddha uses the word I and self. And you yourself are the recipient of the results of your own karma. Like in this lifetime or even in the next lifetime, you receive the results of your own karma. So there is something which goes from life to life, and it is made by yourself. It's your karma, and it goes from life to life. But then when the Buddha says, well, really speaking, there is no such thing as a eternal, everlasting, unchanging self in all this that really belongs to you. So that's a little bit hard to swallow. Let me take a little drop of water. And this anatta is actually one of the things that one is supposed to discover in Vipassana meditation. But instead of that, the beauty of it is that there is something else which the Buddha calls, there is such a thing as the unconditioned, asankata dharma. Everything under the sun, including our own body, feelings, mind, etc., is sankata. That means it is conditioned. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's made up of time and space, its colors and shape. So that is sankata, or it is what you call conditioned. But there is something which the Buddha says it is unconditioned, and that is nirvana. According to him, that's the only thing which is really unconditioned. It has no beginning, no end, has no shape. It cannot be really described in positive terms, although there are some instances in the Tripitaka where the Buddha describes nirvana as the greatest happiness, the deepest peace, and the greatest security. So that is a kind of description, but in most terms, there is a sort of a negative, nirvana, non-becoming. That means it's very difficult to describe it in a positive term because it transcends all thoughts and all concepts and all ideas, and therefore nirvana is something that we cannot really grasp or hold on to or identify with as me, mine, or myself. But the Buddha says, if nirvana would not be there, then there would be no escape from this round of rebirths. Then one would always keep on circling around in birth, death, and rebirth, according to one's what you call karma. And then there would be no way out if there is no such thing as an unconditioned something, and that he called nirvana. But nirvana is not a place or heaven or some kind of devaloka or brahmaloka. Where it is hard to describe, but it can be realized by each one for oneself, and that is actually the aim of the meditation. Let me just read out a passage here from the introduction to the book. The true aim of Satipatthana is nothing less than final liberation from suffering, which is also the highest goal of the Buddha's teaching, Nibbana or Nirvana. The straight and direct path towards it, as provided by Satipatthana, that means the foundations of mindfulness, and a continuous progress on that path require, however, sustained meditative effort applied to a few selected objects of mindfulness. Brief initial instructions in that practice will be given in these pages, that is in this book. So I hope that most of you have actually downloaded this book. It's very simple. It takes only a few seconds. It's free. And then you can really read it conveniently. And it's a little bit, not the easiest kind of book to read, but on the other hand, it's also very crystal clear and no sort of, how do you call it, unnecessary, beating about the bush, so to speak. Isn't it, Mr. Sharma? Are you following all this? And then you see the Satipatthana meditation in the Goenka. I'm just mentioning the second part, which after the first 3 days and of doing Satipatthana on mindfulness of the breath, that is Anapanasati, mindfulness of in and out breath. By the way, that is different from pranayama, by the way. Pranayama, there are different kinds of pranayama I'm aware of, but is a kind of breathing exercise and control of the breath and following the breath in and out and through along the chakras and maybe with bandhanas of stopping the breath and all that. But in Anapanasati, it's actually an observation of the breath inside the nostrils, where you feel the breath touching when you breathe in and out. Not by force, but naturally. In the beginning, you might just take a couple of deep breaths so that you can really feel the breath more clearly. When you take a deep breath, you really feel the air touching near the tip of the nose. Then you know, that's where it touches, and this is what it feels. And you're going to put your attention on it for some time. And in this case, in the 10-day meditation retreat, a la Goenka, for 3 days, 10 hours a day. But then they say, now we are going to change to Vipassana. On day 4, they start what is called Vipassana. Actually, well, there are things to be said for and against it. It's a very popular way of teaching the 10-day courses of Goenka, but Vipassana has a wider scope than just what they say, what is called the sweeping of the body. You feel the sensations from the top of your head and go down one side slowly and the other side slowly and go down the body, feeling all the small and subtle sensations on the skin of your body and go all the way down to the toes and feel all these sensations sort of one by one. And that would be actually what they call Vipassana, because you get a certain insight. Vipassana means, V means into or through. Vipassana is darshana. It is in Sanskrit vidarshana. In Pali, Vipassana. So you get an insight into the real nature of, well, in this case, the body and mind. So when you are feeling the sensations, you're getting an insight into the changing nature of all those sensations. They don't stay the same even for a second. So as you are observing those sensations, you start to realize that, yes, this is a sensation. It comes, it stays, and it goes. It changes all the time. It's not me, not mine, or doesn't belong to me. So all these insights also start coming. So to realize the changing nature is one, and to realize the non-self nature is another, and then to realize that, well, if this is not myself, and if it's changing all the time, then it cannot be really real happiness. Sometimes pleasant feelings, yes, but even those pleasant feelings are not forever, and therefore they're called unsatisfactory, or a form of dukkha. So those realizations start coming. Now, while I'm talking, maybe you might say, yeah, there's a lot of talk, but how do I do it? Well, it doesn't have to be very difficult. I hope that in the second part of our program after the break, we have a little bit more time for a guided meditation, because actually speaking, this meditation is not to be sort of by-hearted. You know, it's not kind of information that you have to store into your brain and then to kind of repeat it, or think, oh, I've forgotten what I just learned, or something like that. No, it's basically, it's a method of remaining as much as possible in the present moment. What does that mean? Well, let's say there is the past, things that have already happened. But very often we are thinking about the past and reliving things about the past. But then that becomes sort of a memory in the present. It's not really that the past comes alive in the present, except for thoughts. And the future is not really here yet. It has to sort of be experienced from moment to moment in the future. But we start what you call fantasizing about the future, maybe with hopes and fears, and may think that, oh, this might happen, that might happen, I hope this might not happen, I hope that this will happen. And then we have just these kind of hopes and fears about the so-called future, but the real future has not come yet. So if we see these kind of thoughts happening in our mind, and we pay attention to thinking and realize that we are only thinking and that it is not a reality, then maybe we will be able to let go of the unnecessary thoughts, which is quite a good thing to get rid of the burden of the so-called past and future. A very good and clear explanation I found in J. Krishnamurti, where he said, well, the past could be divided into technical past and psychological past. The technical past means some things that you have to know, like, for instance, your subjects of your profession, what you've been studying, what you have been doing, and how to do it, all these things, and even to know the way back home. Well, before the Google Maps existed, especially, now they will guide you, but yeah, you have to know certain things. Language, even the language that you talk, is a memory, but it's not a psychological memory. It's just a technical memory. So the technical memories are not the problem, but the psychological problems of things undone, like I could have done this, I should have done that, she or he did this to me or said that to me. And such memories are actually the psychological past coming into the present. But we don't really realize that it's only thinking. When we realize that we are really thinking, and we maybe just naming it as thinking, thinking, thinking. Not so much whether it's good or bad, but just the fact that you're thinking. Then you can let go of it and bring your attention more clearly into the present. And similarly, about the future, there is something called the technical future and the psychological future. The technical future would be that you, as an architect, for instance, or whatever you are doing, even if you need to go shopping, then you have to know what kind of things you want to shop, or whatever you do. You have to make a small plan if you're going to go somewhere, etc., etc. So that is not a problem. That is just technical thoughts about the future. But if you start making psychological thoughts about the future, like, oh, what am I going to do? What might people think of me? What might they think of my work? And I hope that I can do this. That kind of thought is psychological thinking about the future, which leads to fear. It's basically hope and fear. And that is, really speaking, kind of a hindrance to remain, let's say, free from the past and the future in the present. So to be free in the present from that psychological past and future is a help for us to pay attention to the body, feelings, the mind, etc., and the characteristics also. All of a sudden, a small, funny, what you call a cartoon comes to my mind, where two Tibetan monks are meeting, and one says to the other, "I've never seen such a thoughtless person. Congratulations." You see? So, I mean, a lot of people are full of thoughts which are maybe not really necessary. You can't do without thoughts, but you have to notice when the thought is a hindrance, and then to let go of that, and when the thought is necessary, and use it. That's basically what it is. So actually, this Satipatthana Sutta, as it is called, you know, it says that in this Satipatthana lives the creative power, as well as the timeless and universal appeal of a true doctrine of enlightenment. It has the depth and the breadth, the simplicity and the profundity for providing the foundation and the framework of a living Dhamma for all, or at least for that vast and still growing section of humanity that is no longer susceptible to religious or pseudo-religious sedatives, where you go to sleep by practicing some kind of techniques or whatever, and yet feel in their lives and minds the urgency of fundamental problems of a non-material kind, calling for a solution that neither science nor the religions of faith can give. So it sounds like a good method for theosophists also. It's a self-inquiry. For the purpose of such a Satipatthana Dhamma for all, it is essential to work out in detail the applications of this method to modern problems and conditions. So for the benefit of those, particularly in the West, who are not well acquainted with Buddhist literature, some information is also given in this book, but I don't think that most of you live in the West, you live in India, and you're well embedded in terms like karma and all these Sanskrit and maybe Pali terms, Buddhist and Hindu literature. So that is not really necessary, but it is given in this book. Nyanaponika, the great monk who lived up to the age of 95, actually. He died here in Sri Lanka at the age of 95. He was German, but he never, he did go to Germany. He was being invited by somebody from Switzerland, I think, regularly, but he felt himself very much at home in Sri Lanka as a Buddhist monk also, and he was greatly revered. And I think he even got what is called honorary citizenship here in Sri Lanka. So then there is this what is called attention or awareness in the word of sati. Sati or smrti in Sanskrit can mean memory or remembrance. But in the Buddhist usage, however, and in particular in Pali scriptures, it has only occasionally retained that meaning of remembering past events. It mostly refers there to the present. And as a general psychological term, it carries the meaning of attention or awareness. So there is a little bit of a difference of meaning of smrti and sati in the Buddhist sense of the word. This is mostly to do with mindfulness or attention in the moment, awareness. So, but still more frequently, its use in the Pali scriptures is restricted to a kind of attentiveness that, in the sense of the Buddhist doctrine, it is good, skillful, or right. That is called kusala. That is also important, that mindfulness is skillful. Skillful meaning that it leads to peace and happiness for yourself and others. Kusala. You have the other opposite, akusala. Akusala is based on greed and jealousy and hatred and such things, which is called unskillful, akusala. So when there is sati or mindfulness, actually then it is kusala. So in this particular book, he uses the word sati in this particular sense. And it is also in the Eightfold Noble Path, which we saw yesterday in that teaching of the Buddha at the deer park of right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right mindfulness, right concentration. So the mindfulness came under the seventh factor in the Noble Eightfold Path. And then it is called Samma Sati, means fully developed mindfulness or right mindfulness. And then the other part of the word, patthana, satipatthana. Patthana actually means, in this case, that is, well, it says literally, it means placing near one's mind or keeping it present, remaining aware or establishing. So, but it also means that it is the foundation of the mindfulness, such as body, feelings, mind, and other objects of the mind. Those are what is called the four foundations of mindfulness. That is very, yeah. And here it mentions that actually in the Sanskrit version, which is probably very old, the title of the discourse reads as Smrti Upasthana Sutra. And according to that explanation, the complete word may be rendered by the presence of mindfulness. To be aware, that's basically it. So either you are aware or you're not aware. And yesterday, as we noticed that when Sujata came to, in Sujata Gram near Bodh Gaya, and she saw Prince Siddhartha meditating under the tree, and she thought that he was a Ruksha Devata, or a tree god, and she asked, "Excuse me, are you the tree god, Ruksha Devata?" Then the Buddha or Prince Siddhartha said, "No." "Oh, then are you a human being?" "No." "Well, what are you then?" Then the Buddha said, "I am awake," which is a funny, combination of and wake. There's no such thing as awake, but he is fully awake. And that is also a meaning, actually, of the word Buddha, the enlightened one, or the one who is fully awake. So maybe if there are some kind of short questions now before we go for our 15 minutes break, it is now 9 to 6, then we could have a little bit that and then retire for the 15 minutes. Are there any people who would like to say or ask something now? Maybe any suggestions?
Sir, would you like to take questions now?
Well, just I'm suggesting we have about 8 minutes. If there are some sort of urgent questions, then we could handle 1 or 2, and then we can go on after 15 minutes.
Okay. I request all the participants to please put your questions in the chat if you have any, and we can take it from there. Right now, I don't see any questions here in the chat. Shikharji, if you have it in YouTube, any questions?
Okay, I will just check. Yeah.
Okay. Sir, meanwhile, I would like to put forth one question, if you please.
Yes, yes, please.
While mentioning about the future, the technical future and the psychological future. So psychological future, you mentioned, it has these 2 factors of hope and fear.
Yes.
So is it not right even to keep hope? Because that is psychological future, but we want to be in the present.
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yes. Well, I would say, yes, hope is good. And for instance, His Holiness the Dalai Lama is always emphasizing to keep hope. You know, without hope, we would be sort of hopeless. But when there is what is called hoping for this and hoping for that, but you don't get what you are expecting, basically. That is maybe, instead of hoping, it could be called expecting. So you see, in that sense of the word, hoping for this, hoping for that. So that goes together actually with fear of not getting what you want.
Okay.
So in that sense, I think it is not a very skillful state of mind to be in, but yeah, to be positive and to think that one can do it and things will be all right, and to have hope that things will get better, all that. But on the other hand, we also have to be realistic.
Right. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Sir, what is the technical future? Technical
future. Yes, that is something that we have to do, something that we have to, for instance, an engineer who is planning to build a bridge or a house or a building, that means, or even if we want to go on a journey, and by train, for instance, or by plane, you have to get your suitcase ready, and you have to buy your ticket, you have to go to the station or the airport and all that kind of thing. That is, you know, something technical. You cannot really get around it. So, but if you start thinking about, yeah, but will I become the best architect in the world? What might people think of my building? Or, you know, what will happen on the way when I'm traveling? That kind of thing is psychological. I don't know who was asking that question, but
I am Ashok Patnaik asked.
Okay, sir. So I think we have no further questions now. We will take up the questions after break. So I would like to thank you for your inspirational words in this first session. And now we will have a short break for 15 minutes. During this break, there will be no live streaming on YouTube. And after 15 minutes, we will reassemble for discussion and questions for 15 minutes. And then it will be followed by half an hour meditation. So thank you.
thank you.